Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I think everyone was slightly concerned that we were both trapped under something heavy on Monday night when we did not release another episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast featuring the Michigan sign stealing scandal and the various fallouts from all of that. It's fine, no problem. We're all fine. I just had work stuff all day during the day, and then Tony had a basketball game to cover on Monday night, so timing did not work out. But here we are on lovely Tuesday morning. You're getting two Buckeye Weeklies today because we have a whole live show to do Tuesday night when the new college playoff rankings come out. So don't worry, you're going to get your usual dose of the two of us. You're welcome, and/or we're sorry.
The last time we did a show around this would have been Friday night, and every 2 days seems like a lifetime ago. And this entire ordeal of just talking about it, and then a couple of days will pass, and then something new will happen, and you're like, where did we leave off? I'm having this trouble where I'm listening to a book on tape, right? And I fall asleep during it, and I have to go back, and I've listened to like the same chapter like 6 times. I wonder at what point when we get to the point where we're talking about the same stuff? I don't know, because we're not there yet, because stuff just keeps happening, Tom. And since the last time we talked, I don't even know if we should list the things or just get into it. Like the Ryan Day family thing, that was shot down to Monday night, early Monday evening. And then, of course, the Michigan nuclear bombs that have been dropping the last 24 hours or so. So wherever you want to begin, Tom, I'm okay with that.
Boy, let's see. I have like 57 tabs open on my computer right now. I'm just going to pick a tab at random here. All right, let's see. This is probably a good place to start. Michigan, this is from Nicole Auerbach on Monday. She was one of many, many people to tweet this out and report this. Michigan has received formal notification from the Big Ten of potential disciplinary action. Source confirms, as ESPN's Adam Rittenberg noted, this is a required step in the disciplinary process via the Big Ten Sportsmanship Policy. So essentially, okay, Michigan, you have been told that we believe you have done stuff against the rules. You are now on the clock. And based on reporting from Pete Thamel and others, it sounds like that's probably a 48-ish hour. Okay, now you have a window to respond. Michigan AD Ward Manuel put out a statement that he was going to be skipping the college football playoff rankings whole thing on Tuesday. Obviously part of, staying home. Tony, I'm going to wildly speculate that has something to do with the ongoing thing with the Big Ten and in terms of Michigan formulating its response. So that's sort of where we are right now. And then, the expectation would be there is some kind, the next big step in this is Michigan turns in its homework on Wednesday or so, and then there is a decision from the Big Ten after that. And then from that point, it's all, where does it go from there? And that's where things really start to get fun.
Yeah, and that's where we start to wait for more leaks from the NCAA side, the Big Ten side, Michigan side, and then you try to decipher who is this bit of news helping. That lets you know where it is coming from, which is also an interesting part in all of this. But so while we wait for this to happen, we got to go back to maybe what can happen. And this is something we've talked about several times, which is right now, it seems like Tony Petitti at any point could just levy a 2-game suspension, because that's for the head coach. That's in his purview. That is in the bylaws. But I'm wondering, and again, speculation, just talking this through, the discussion of Michigan really getting their lawyers lawyering up, getting their lawyers ready. It felt to me like this was maybe more than a 2-game suspension, or if the Michigan lawyers or the Michigan department or the university itself doesn't believe that what Jim Harbaugh is known to have done or hasn't known to have done isn't worth or doesn't meet the 2-game requirement. So I'm wondering if the Big Ten wanted more, and the Michigan is like, you can't ask for more without the JGEC, as we know, the JGEC, without the kicking it up a notch to involve more people than just Petiti. So there's like, while these responses are going back and forth and we're waiting, I'm just wondering what it is that has caused, or what it is that the Big Ten wants right now in terms of how many pounds of flesh. Is it 2 pounds or whatever? And does Michigan deem something to be too much? And I wonder, is that something we will find out soon in terms of what is the response time? And then so Michigan responds, and then the Big Ten comes back and says, okay, thank you for the response. Here's your suspension.
That feels like where this is headed, that Michigan has their 2 days thereabouts to respond. That gets you to Wednesday midday. And then at some point after that, the Big Ten announces, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to just be, we are, as Tony said, speculating. We're not going to tell you we absolutely know what's going to happen. We don't know the timing of this. We don't know exactly what the punishment's going to be. We know sort of the spectrum of potential punishments that Tony Petiti can issue on his own. And then there's, beyond that, they have to go to the JGAC, as Tony said, which is just basically a board of administrators from the various Big Ten schools that are sort of serving as a council of elders, I guess, to, say, yes, this is reasonable, this is not reasonable. And I would guess that you're going to take a little bit of time to get, process what Michigan has sent you on Wednesday or whenever that is. But if there's a suspension coming, and you get the sense from some of the reporting that's out there that is, that the Big Ten is leaning very strongly towards a suspension, whether it's 2 games or more than that, if a suspension's coming, you're not going to put that out at Friday at 5 p.m. because Michigan has a pretty significant game this weekend. They play at Penn State Saturday in State College, so they're going to be getting on an airplane Friday afternoon at some point. So I'm assuming you're going to see that late Wednesday, maybe Thursday sometime. I don't think you can wait till Friday afternoon to dump that. So then, and then the question is, what does Michigan do in response? And Michigan has certainly, Michigan is letting everyone know who will listen that, oh boy, we're not going to stand for that. We are going to put out we're going to fight this tooth and nail. We're going to get a court. There's been the idea of, they're going to go to court and they're going to get an emergency injunction to stop this from happening. And, how does that go? You get the sense you can probably shop it to a friendly judge and get some sort of a temporary something or other to delay it. But again, this is all, layers upon layers of speculation at this point. But that feels like maybe where this ends up. And then as far as the timing on what, when is there a hearing on that does the emergency injunction, would that last beyond, the next hearing? Does the Big Ten present like, hey, here's our compelling evidence that you should release that? All of that is all kind of up in the air right now. But that sort of feels to me like where this is trending. But, there's a lot here that we don't know. I mean, because there's been a lot of reporting this week on Ross Dellinger from Yahoo has put out a bunch of stuff on or Sports Illustrated. His stuff, I think, shows up on Yahoo. I don't know. It's
Yahoo.
Yeah, it is Yahoo. Okay, so Ross Dellinger from Yahoo, he put out, the NCAA revealed its findings in the Michigan sign stealing investigation to the Big Ten. The conference continues to consider a multi-game suspension of head coach Jim Harbaugh as the school gears up for legal action, sources tell Yahoo Sports. So, okay, so this is multi-game. Good news. Multi-game can mean 2 games or more than 2 games. So we've learned something, but not that much there. We know that Michigan is gearing up for a legal response. We know that. The next paragraph is, I think, where it's really interesting. And, this is the one where Michigan people are now taking Ross Dellinger's reporting as absolute gospel. And, and then everything else that he says is garbage. But here he's really smart. Quote, the NCAA's findings do not connect the in-person scouting and recording of opponent sidelines to Harbaugh, sources say, an absence of evidence essential to a potential lawsuit from the school and coach against the league. And this is one of the great unknowns here, because the NCAA, according to the NCAA guidelines, the head coach is responsible for anything that people below him do. So if these violations occurred under the NCAA guidelines, the head coach is responsible for them. So then that would, nuke the idea, no one cares that you didn't know, or, that there's nothing that definitively shows that you knew. You're still responsible. That's the NCAA position. What I'm not clear on, and I don't think you're clear on either, is that the standard in the Big Ten? Does the Big Ten sort of default to the NCAA standard on this? Because that's not something that I have seen spelled out definitively one way or the other. So, that's not necessarily exculpatory, but it could be. So, but based on the fact that that the Big Ten seems to be plowing ahead with this, that makes me think that, okay, they have reason to believe that just because there's not anything definitively proving that Jim Harbaugh didn't know, that it doesn't matter, you can still go forward with it. That would also, to me, explain why we're talking about Jim Harbaugh and we're not talking about, the coordinators who we saw talking to Connor Stallion, because offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator are not held to that standard. That is a head coach standard. So to me, that's certainly suggestive that the Big Ten is going to be using that as a standard. But again, we won't know that for sure until the Big Ten releases something specific about this.
Yeah, or somebody just can talk to the Big Ten. It's difficult to actually get a hold of people in terms of, hey, I just want this rules clarification. Do you guys follow the same rules as the NCAA, where the head coach is responsible for everything? Or are you a much more, I don't want to say matter of fact, but there needs to be direct evidence, and you're not just assuming that the head coach should know. And instead, the head coach must know. And if the head coach doesn't, if you can't prove that he knows, then what are you basing your punishment on? But it sure seems like the lack of control, if you will, the lack of institutional control. I'm not going to use the NCAA words there, but that sort of thing can bring about the 2-game suspension. Like if you have angered the Big Ten or embarrassed the Big Ten or whatever, it seems like this 2-game suspension could just be not necessarily willy-nilly, but maybe. And so if you're able to go with that kind of approach in terms of you can suspend a head coach, it seems like that it doesn't necessarily require direct evidence that the head coach has done something wrong. You're more like punishing the program, but you're punishing the leader of that program being the head coach, the leader of that team. So I wonder if that does carry over. It seems like that would be a good question for the national reporters who have these guys on speed dial, the commissioners, to be, hey, just for clarification, which basis for evidence are you using, and the basis of responsibility are you using? Then we would know. And until we get that, we'll just, again, we're wondering, we're speculating in terms of that. But something is going to happen.
Right. Something is going to happen. And I'm going to sort of jump to a different report here. This from Sports Illustrated. This is Richard Johnson from Sports Illustrated. And we'll get into the whole AP story and all of that. And this report was sort of above and beyond the AP report on this topic. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But, this is something where Richard Johnson, he comes out and says he sources this as sources familiar with the Michigan program. That means people connected with Michigan in some way, whether that's active coaches or, people who are very close to active coaches or administrators or something like that. So this is sourced from the Michigan side of things. I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs here. Quote, Petitti is facing the difficult task of finding an appropriate punishment in an unprecedented situation without much clarity within the Big Ten bylaws. So again, this is gray area. I think that suggests also that we're talking about sort of a gray area in terms of head coaching responsibility and that type of thing. All while Big Ten and NCAA investigations are still in motion. However, sources familiar with the Michigan program told SI that the school is bracing for Petitti to levy punishment, quote, Tony told Michigan this was the worst scandal in Big Ten history, not including game fixing, close quote. One Big Ten administrator told SI. So, first of all, I think this is someone summing up what Tony Petitti said. And I think I've seen a lot of people, pointing at that and saying, what about Jerry Sandusky? And I think the strong implication there is he's talking about on-field scandals that, didn't actually result in, material harm to a number of different people. So, that I think is, again, this is someone relaying something from someone else. So that's probably not a direct quote, but just the severity of that, the worst scandal in Big Ten history, not including game fixing, that feels to me, and now we're out of out of things that we think the things that we know, we're into the land of speculation and vibes again here. That certainly feels to me like they're anticipating more than a 2-game suspension, because the worst scandal in Big Ten history outside of game fixing, which is basically a lifetime ban kind of thing, that feels to me like you have seen the phrase indefinite suspension floated a number of times from various sources. That to me tracks with their thinking about an indefinite suspension and more than 2 games. But then you've got to go to the JGAC. So then that probably is, I am not going to read the Big Ten bylaws to you again. I'm sorry, friends. I know this is everyone's favorite news subject or segment, but I'm not going to do it. But to sum up, the JGAC has to get the Michigan response. The Michigan response is part of what the JGAC considers. So that would get you into, they have to get that response from Michigan on Wednesday if they're looking to do more than two games. And then that probably does get you into Wednesday night, Thursday. I mean, maybe Friday morning, maybe if they're going to run it through the JGAC and have it be more than a 2-game suspension, or they could do a 2-game suspension for now and then potentially expand it later if they wanted to run it that way. There's a couple different ways this could go basically, and all of it, but just sort of, again, reading the room here, that to me, that kind of indirect quote from a Big Ten administrator sure feels like they're thinking about more than just a 2-game suspension.
Yeah, something I've been wondering about is, we know Tony Petitti can essentially hand down a 2-game suspension for something he deems worthy of that. What if he were to deem multiple things worthy of that and hand down consecutive 2-game suspensions rather than concurrent 2-game suspensions? That would also be something interesting to talk to the commissioner or a Big Ten person about. Because if this is the biggest scandal in Big Ten history on field, it seems like there would be more than one thing to throw a 2-game suspension at.
Well, I think you might, and again, I am not an attorney. I am not, you know all of the things I am not, friends. I tell you all the times, all of the things that many times I've told you all of the things I am not. To me, with my reading many times of the Big Ten sportsmanship policy, I would assume that is a per institutional acknowledgement, institutional, notification thing where you can't just give sequential sentences to, you had 7 different violations, so that's now 14 games, and that's how I'm getting around the 2-game thing. That's probably a separate notification process, would be my guess. But, again, that is just a guess. We're not going to sit here and pretend we absolutely know lots of things that we're sort of reading the room on, making informed speculation on. But that would be my read of that situation.
That makes sense. Tom, let me go to somebody who does know something. Let me read you a quote. When someone uncovers a scandal in their company, I don't think they can say, I didn't know what was going on. They're just saying they're too dumb to do their job. And if they are really too dumb, then why are they getting paid millions of dollars to do it? They know what's going on. That quote was from Bo Schembechler in a book that he wrote about leadership. Thoughts?
Yes. I saw that, and I was going to go. Have you checked to see if that was actually pulled from the book? It was a book on leadership I saw from Bo Schembechler in the early 2000s. That was how it was presented. I was going to double check whether that was really there and was not just a Photoshop. It sure sounds like how Bo talked about this kind of stuff, and I had the great pleasure of meeting Bo on a number of occasions in the early 2000s. When I worked at the ABC station up in Detroit, and he taped the Big Ten ticket show with the great Don Shane up there. And so I would go over and BS with Bo for 15 to 30 minutes on Friday when I was supposed to be writing news stories about whatever was going on in Detroit. That certainly to me sure sounds like Bo in Bo's voice based on my interactions with him. But, I meant to double check that before, because there has been a lot of, I find myself double checking everything right now because there's been a lot of misinformation going around.
And I did, I double checked like anybody. I Googled, and that quote is also all over the place in terms of all of the quote sites. So Tom, I also wanted to look, but I stopped at Google. So, but it was there. That's pretty much why I stopped.
Yeah, if it was not something that was just made up this morning, like it never appears anywhere else on the internet, then that's probably true. But yeah, I mean, just to give you guys a sense of our process here as well, that we're trying to sift through, because there has been a bunch of nonsense out there that all very much sounds like Bo. And Harbaugh is a Bo guy. He is a Bo guy in the most Bo guy kind of way, where he played for him. You read his quotes from the early 2010s about, and this is like on his own Twitter account, quotes on cheating. And if you cheat to win, you've already lost, and all that kind of stuff. And, and frankly, Bo Schembechler is not the standard here. The NCAA standard is the standard, at least in terms of the NCAA. And we're sort of interpreting that to also be the standard that the Big Ten is going to take in this. Again, we don't know that for a fact, but it sure seems like that's, the way this is being handled, that's the standard the Big Ten is going to use. And that's the most important thing, is that the NCAA changed its rules after some of the basketball cheating, where it was like, oh no, it was just this one rogue low-level staffer. It's always, Tony, just one rogue low-level staffer. And, nobody knew anything. And, the NCAA has adjusted its rules accordingly.
Can we discuss the AP and the SI article now that we're talking about low level? Because low level staffer was mentioned in the AP article that came out yesterday. And I think we need to stop calling him a low level staffer, because he's on the sidelines talking to the offensive and defensive coordinators right before they're making a call. That is a high level staffer. That is a place of prominence. That is not a low-level staffer. Maybe the pay grade is low-level, but he's right there with the coaches. So once I see low-level staffer written in a story, I'm like, come on, that's not so low-level. But so the AP comes out with a story about an current coach there's basically sign sharing. Michigan's signs have been shared amongst other programs, and there's a spreadsheet of this. And so that was the first of the nuclear bombs being released by Michigan, apparently. Then SI comes out and details it even more. And this is all very good news for Michigan fans, that Big Ten teams are designing ways or combating against the Wolverines, because it shows that everybody steals signs. The thing is, Tom, ever since this whole thing began, Michigan fans have been telling us that everybody steals signs. So I'm not sure what the gotcha here is, but like you have, I have a bunch of tabs open. But the gist there, the one point in the SI story mentions that coaches sharing signals and things like that, and information, isn't an NCAA violation. and other coaches downplayed it, saying everybody does it. And we've got this full circle 180 type of thing now, where all of the things that Michigan fans were telling us when we were talking about sign stealing and that sign stealing is legal, now that there's a report that some maybe no more than 3 Big Ten schools were sharing information back and forth, now that that's some sort of a gotcha, when what is happening there is apparently legal. And the whole thing with the sign stealing that Michigan and Connor Stallions has done is they went outside of the rules to do that. And that's the disconnect between these two things is immense. And I don't know that it will ever be connected, because some people refuse to believe the way the things were gotten is the biggest issue in all of this.
Well, and I think I posted about this on Tuesday morning on Twitter, and had a bunch of people in my replies explaining that, well, actually there's, this is really a gray area. And I'm just going to I'll read verbatim. Tony kind of summarized this, but I'm going to read verbatim. This is from the SI article that talks about this. So this is the article that is, again, this is from Richard Johnson, and this is, reading between the lines here, certainly seems like it is sourced from Michigan, the Michigan side of things, and is something that Michigan folks are holding up as an example of, oh boy, I saw this referred to as a nuclear bomb on one of the Michigan sites, which, okay. Direct quote, schools sharing signal information is not uncommon in college football. Multiple sources in the coaching profession told SI, nor is it against NCAA rules. And now a quote within the quote, every week you call your friends on other staffs and say, and now a quote within the quote, hey, what you got on our next opponent, close quote. A coach with current Big Ten experience said, everyone does it, who cares? Sign stealing off television or across the field during games is allowed. What Stallions is accused of doing, orchestrating a network of associates to perform impermissible in-person advanced scouting and recording future Michigan opponent signals dozens of times, is in violation of the rules. And the area where people are sort of pointing to this is, well, if the other team, if Team B played Michigan and was doing, was getting signs during that, and then you share them, then that becomes advanced in-person scouting. And I mean, I can see how it can be spun that way. I understand that is certainly what Michigan is going to argue here. Can you point me to the rules where it says that that's true? Because it right now feels like sign stealing in general, in-person, in-game sign stealing, not advanced sign stealing, not electronic sign stealing, which is what Connor Stallions in Michigan are accused of. In-person, in-game sign stealing is, one of those gray areas where it's not specifically against the rules. And everyone, including Michigan, has said everyone does it. So this is, to me, well, you were almost lined up off sides. But if you're not lined up off sides, then you're not off sides. You might be going right up to the line, but it's not a penalty unless you're in the neutral zone in the, or in the other team's backfield. You can certainly construct an argument around the idea that everyone does it. And boy, this is so close to what Connor Stallions is accused of doing. But when the line of legality is between those two things that are, one is legal, one is not, that's still kind of, that is literally the standard. The standard is, did you break the rules? And if one thing is on one side and one thing is on another, you can sit here and rationalize it. You go, well, it's almost the same thing. Like, well, really, is it not? And again, if there is a rule, and I am not professing to be a complete expert on everything here, if there is a rule that specifically outlaws that, then sure, that's a great legal argument. But until you show me the rule, and I have not seen the rule, I've had this explained condescendingly in my Twitter mentions all morning, but I've not actually seen anyone cite chapter and verse like, well, here's where the rule is, because the actual rule, like we've cited that chapter and verse a bunch of times. So that seems like a pretty clear delineation to me.
Well, and I think part of the problem stems from the AP, which had this story first, in which they write that the alleged actions by Michigan's opponents potentially violate the Big Ten sportsmanship policy, which is being used as the basis of the conference's case against Michigan. I don't know that we've seen anything in the sportsmanship policy that says that. So the potentiality of that, I think maybe Michigan fans and maybe the Michigan legal team are doing using that as maybe more than it actually than the way it actually has. I do find it interesting that when this whole Connor Stallions thing was coming out with his vast network of spies, there were plenty of Michigan fans who tried to say that that's technically that's third party scouting, because Michigan isn't going out and scouting it. They're using other people to do it. So I would just say, Tom, this is just third party scouting, and be done with it. But the fact that it seems to be legal, again, the NCAA knows, the Big Ten will know, lawyers will know whether this stuff is legal, and we're just talking about it. But I do think, and this is me speculating, the names of the schools have not been released because the person giving the information felt that it would reveal who they are. I get this sense, though, however, if Ohio State was involved in any way with any of these schools, that name somehow would have, Ohio State would have gotten into that story somehow, just because this is the biggest, most voraciously consumed story that we've seen on the internet and television and radio in the college football world in years. And so if you can tie Michigan and Ohio State together in this and you don't do it, you're kind of missing out. And so I feel like if Ohio State's name was in there somewhere, whether they were one of again, there may be only 3 teams involved in this Big Ten vast conspiracy regarding Michigan signs, but I feel like they still would have tried, or somebody would have tried to get Ohio State's name in there, because it makes the story even juicier. And right now, like I said, people can't get enough of this stuff. And so if you can give them a little bit more, then you're going to try in this one.
Well, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think there's protecting your sources and all that kind of stuff. You're going to play it kind of close to the vest. There's certainly been speculation about who that person is. We're not morons, so we're not going to publicly speculate about someone's name who is or is not going to be potentially involved in this. Which sure, hey Tony, speaking of transitions, can we talk about Ryan Day and his family? Because in addition to the new reporting from Ross Dellinger on Yahoo about sources don't the NCAA's findings do not connect the in-person scouting and recording of opponent sidelines to Harbaugh, sources say, in absence of evidence it's essential to a potential lawsuit from the school and coach against the league. About 15 minutes after that dropped and Michigan fans thought Ross Dellinger was the greatest reporter on earth, sources, NCAA says Ohio State's Ryan Day had no known ties to Michigan sign-stealing probe. The NCAA notified the Big Ten on Monday that there are no known connections between Ohio State head coach Ryan Day or his family and the conference's investigation into Michigan. Senior officials at both the association and conference told Yahoo Sports. Boy, we probably need to have a whole separate conversation about journalistic standards and speculation. And, did Kevin and I have the journalism law law class conversation on the air or off the air? I can't remember.
You guys were talking about it in the car while I was trying to drive.
Okay, maybe it was off the air. Yeah, we were talking about the fact that we were not legal experts, but we had taken journalism law. Hey, this falls real neatly within journalism law. Defamation and all that. And if defamation for public figures such as Ryan Day, the standard is actual malice, which is I know this is wrong and I'm intentionally saying this, and that might be a hard case to prove. But if someone was a relatively anonymous relative of a person like a college football head coach and got their name dragged through the mud and apparently received threats as a result of that, well, boy, that would be a whole separate matter, wouldn't it? So, if you're wondering why we keep hedging and telling you everything we don't know and, not pretending to have incredible sources on all sorts of stuff, this may be related. Like you can just even if people are telling you like, oh, we definitely know, like you can ask for, substantiation of that, because if the Big Ten doesn't have it, then it certainly feels like that might not exist. So that feels like maybe that's a pump the brakes kind of situation in terms of what you should be putting out there. Because even if you're big mad, like you have to kind of report what you know, not what not what people want to be the case right now. And I'm not saying this has been conclusively proven and will never be never be proven wrong. I'm saying you gotta wait until you actually know what's going on, even if you're super up in your feelings about something.
The first response I saw from a Michigan fan about this report was, so the tweet from Ross Dellinger says, on Monday, the NCAA notified the Big Ten that there are no known connections between Ohio State Ryan Day or his family and the organization's investigation into Michigan. First response was, quote, no known. And that's where we are as a society right now. Yeah. Well, can you disprove the unprovable or prove the like, can you just take the information for what it says right there? And no, some people can't. But like you said, Tom, this just means what the information they have right now, there's no connection. And maybe they get more, maybe they don't. But to just assume that more will come, that might not be the case. And so, and also to ignore the information that is there right now. But even then you just move on to the next thing. And so the whole Ryan Day family thing was, for 2 weeks, Ryan Day was behind this entire thing and his family was behind this entire thing. And one brother grew into two brothers, and the entire Day family organization was out to take Michigan down. And now, okay, well, we'll move on to that. Now it's a conspiracy from the entire Big Ten to take Michigan down. Maybe it's two or three teams sharing signals, and again, stealing signs doesn't even change your signals. That's all you got to do. Change your signals. Don't be so simple to be caught. I've been told that many times. Also, Tom, cope harder. Maybe cope harder some, or maybe cry harder. Things like that. This is all not a very big deal, but you see all of this, and the idea that the coaches or the Big Ten is out to get Michigan because of their dominance is silly to me. 2 years of winning the Big Ten, when the 4 years prior to that, Ohio State won the Big Ten every year. Ohio State has won the Big Ten 10 of the previous 18 years before Michigan went on their 2-year run. Like, if this is somebody out to get the Michigan because of their dominance, they would have tried to get Ohio State the past 2 decades because of their dominance, especially the 2017 to 2020, doing that kind of 4-year run. Like, the shifting of, okay, well, this one has been debunked, but now let's go to this. And then, well, okay, let's just keep piling on. And I've seen reports that, this is just the start of it from Michigan's rebuttal side, and they're going to keep dropping bombs. And I'm waiting, and maybe we'll get it, because it's not like the conference is not like every entity in the conference is squeaky clean. I know that's not true. Maybe one of these bombs will actually leave a crater. At this point, they're just, I don't know, like seeding the clouds for tears.
I don't know, Tony, you sounded pretty soft there when you were explaining all of that. I'm not so sure. Yeah, it's just, there's kind of this like, well, I'm hearing, and the standard for what is reportable right now has seemed to vary widely by outlet, and has seemingly gotten lower as things have come along. And it's just, now it's like, well, I heard that maybe they were, and that's now reportable information that is just thrown out there. And I mean, how many times, Tony, over the last years have I said, I'm just glad this isn't a problem on the broader cultural world that we live in. This only impacts sports media, but it sure does feel like people have just sort of like dug in on their side, and are everything that is on my side is definitely true, and conclusively proved proven, and everything that is on the other side is definitely entirely fake, not real at all lies, all from the haters, all from people with an axe to grind. It's all fake, and that's why it doesn't matter. And that's why anything that happens to me or my team is going to be the greatest miscarriage of justice in the history of the world. Because, I mean, I saw a prominent Michigan site who the extent of one of their recent posts was, "This is all BS." And that phrase was repeated multiple times. And it's like, well, I mean, you can selectively view information and probably come to that conclusion, but it seems like there's everyone who is not part of the pro-Michigan side of things, including, this is not just Ohio State fans going, ha ha ha. There are a number of national folks who are saying like, hey, it feels like there's some smoke here, and Connor Stalions resigned. That feels like there's, there was some wrongdoing there. This is not just completely all made up. And, at some point when people are telling you just repeatedly the stuff you want to hear, and it keeps not coming true, at some point you should recognize the pattern there. And I think this is one of the reasons why Tony and I keep saying, when we don't know something, we are going to tell you we don't know something. We're not going to go out there and just say, oh, this is absolutely fake. This is absolutely, this is absolutely made up. There's a lot of stuff that we have said on both sides of this, like, we don't know. We are not sure. And you've got people going out and floating, absolute definite timelines. He is going to be suspended and it's going to happen on Monday. Like, okay, well, now that didn't happen. So congratulations. Now everyone knows you don't know what you're talking about. You got to recognize, hey, there is stuff that we know. There's stuff that we think we know or think that we maybe understand. And there's stuff that is going to be determined by people who are much more specialized in these areas than we are. You have to recognize sometimes you don't know. Sometimes this is all going to be sort of this, you got to just let this thing play out a little bit. And that's going to, it is going to play out. I know it feels like we've been talking about this for 3 years. It's been 3 weeks, maybe not quite 3 weeks at this point. You got to just let this stuff play out. And it's not like you're going to have to wait a month and a half for this to play out. This is the next big steps in this are going to come at some point this week. I mean, we're talking Wednesday it sounds like is when Michigan has to get their response back. And then sometime after that, in the next 24, maybe 36, maybe hours after that, you're going to have the Big Ten's response. And then I saw something that Michigan's going to have their legal response ready in 10 minutes after that. So you won't have to wait long there. I guess the question, Tony, is do we have to, when the Big Ten does put out its decision, can we combine that emergency podcast with the Michigan has issued an injunction podcast, or do we have to do like an 8-minute podcast and then stop and then start a new one when Michigan 10 minutes later supposedly has its legal response ready?
I think what we'll do is we'll pre-record the 8-minute injunction podcast and then run it inside the live show as here we go. Let's go to our correspondents, Tom and Tony, and we'll toss to them and they'll go through that. And then we'll come back and like, oh, wow, thanks. Great insight, guys. Fantastic working with you. I think through all of this, as this is kind of seen by some as a victory for Michigan, is the fact that there is still wrongdoing from Michigan being investigated. Like that is still going on. And this is, if it's deflection or whatever, and if those coaches or programs are found to have done wrong, then they deserve to be punished as well. But there's still like this sign stealing, the vast network of spies, all of that is still happening. Just because, oh, look over here at what one coach said, doesn't mean that everything that has been absolved, Michigan has been absolved. And even after the Big Ten comes out, and if they give no punishment, like, well, we didn't have anything on Jim Harbaugh. We couldn't connect him, so really we have no recourse. We're just going to let the NCAA play out. The NCAA is still going to play out the situation. So like you might be in the clear for a little while, but it's not like this thing is going to go away. As we've already mentioned, some people are saying it's the biggest on-field scandal in Big Ten history. I don't expect that to just go quietly into the night. At some point, there's going to be some repercussions from it. And it seems like so long ago, Tom, we did a show Friday night because of the change in tone of the reporting from the Michigan side. That is still out there as well. Like this dour tone of, oh no, something is happening, something is coming. And then it seems like the base got riled up in terms of, oh, don't worry, we've got some responses and we're going to get the lawyers involved. And so it's like you're going to be fighting a battle. So great. But that doesn't take away from the potential and alleged wrongdoing that has been done that will eventually have some sort of repercussion. Like these are, any victory at this point is I feel like temporary.
It does feel like, you got to remember, not only do you have this whole investigation, which is going to play out at the NCAA level, you also have the previous NCAA investigation, which still needs to play out and, may or may not end up getting combined with this. They're separate things. And by the way, if anyone's still calling that hamburgers, they are also an unreliable narrator in this situation, because it has been widely reported that there were COVID era recruiting issues, violations potentially at the center of that. So if people are calling that hamburgers, you should probably stop listening to them, because they are just telling you what they want you to hear or what you want to hear. This is going to be, it feels like this is whatever happens now in terms of a punishment in the short to medium term this season. Let's just say whatever happens in terms of a punishment this season is not the end of either of those stories. This is all going to be hanging over the Michigan program for quite a while. It certainly has been, widely speculated that Michigan is really just trying to get through this season because they have a national championship potential team. And that you're trying to get through this season, and then whatever happens after that. But, you want to compete for a national championship, which, I'm so old, Tony, that I can remember when the criticism of Ryan Day wanting to play in the year of our Lord 2020 was that Ohio State had a national championship caliber team. And that's the only reason Ryan Day cared. And thousands of people were going to die from, college football players playing college football, even though people all over the South were doing it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What's going to be so interesting is after the season, are the people who are saying, well, you can't rush judgment now, are they going to say, well, you can't really punish Michigan because, the guys who, if Jim Harbaugh goes off to the NFL, hypothetically, after this season, wouldn't really be right to punish the guys who are still here at Michigan because, that's stuff that guys who left have done. And, Connor Steins isn't here anymore, and maybe Jim Harbaugh's not here, and maybe coordinators or assistant coaches or someone who might be caught up in that. It would be fair to punish them. You can kind of already see this sort of playing out. And, this is all going to be, we don't know, we have a decent sense of the time frame in the short term. We don't know for sure what the punishment levied or attempted to be levied and what the response to that is going to be in the short term. And we don't know what the time frame is in terms of an NCAA investigation, which could take, sometimes that's 6 months, sometimes that's multiple years. This is going to be, this is going to take a while to really, truly get to the, to the end of things. But it feels like, boy, this is going to be a pretty consequential week. And if I'm guessing right now, Jim Harbaugh is going to be suspended at some point this week. That is my current read of things by the Big Ten. Will Jim Harbaugh actually be on the sidelines in Happy Valley on Saturday? That I'm much less confident about.
Yeah, that's where the 10-minute later injunction is put forth, and we'll see what happens with that. Just the idea, and I've seen some Michigan reporters, internet reporters, saying that Michigan has more. So if the Big Ten wants to keep pushing this, they're going to just continue to bring out more and more and drop more and more bombs. And I've seen some people saying, like, let's just burn the Big Ten to the ground. Michigan's going to burn the Big Ten to the ground. They're going to take everybody with them. And that's all well and good to get your base fired up like that. but I don't see the Michigan administration doing anything to damage their reputation in the Big Ten or their situation in the Big Ten. Certainly not leaving for the SEC or the ACC, as some well-known Michigan folks have claimed, or folk has claimed, or said they would do. So this is a situation where I think at some point Michigan is going to have to realize that the Big Ten is bigger than they are, the NCAA is bigger than they are, and whatever that means, it means. But no one entity is bigger than the conference, and no one entity is bigger than the NCAA. And I know we all say the NCAA has lost its bite, and that's certainly true in many senses. And I do think you're exactly right with the well, after the season, it's just like, well, those people are gone. Our attention span, it no longer exists, basically. And I think the Big Ten coaches and the administrators understand that. That's why they want something now. And so for the NCAA, who no longer really wants to punish future people for past problems, they can't just operate at the same slow pace they've always done. If you want to punish the people who are responsible, then you have to act faster than you normally do. And the Big Ten can act faster, but as we stated at the outset, we don't know if they're going to use the same type of level of the head coach is responsible for everything. But it sure seems like they're putting a lot of onus on Jim Harbaugh. And I'm with you. I would expect something to come out, some sort of a suspension to come out this week, because I don't know what Michigan's argument is. And if it's, well, look at these other programs, that's not a defense of what you're doing. That's just in addition to what you have done, here's what some other programs have done. And that's not really a defense. That's just noise.
Well, and if, the bombs and all the stuff that's supposed to be coming out sequentially from Michigan, I mean, we'll see what that ends up being, if it ends up being anything. But, the first two, as we said, feels like, broadly speaking, hey, here's teams that were doing stuff that was kind of similar, but on the legal side of the legal/illegal line, whereas the stuff that, has been basically already publicly acknowledged that Michigan did and Counter Stallions did in particular is on the illegal side of that line. So, I have never seen a nuclear blast in person, but, teams were doing stuff that is, sort of maybe in a moral gray area, but not actually illegal. Feels like it falls somewhere short of, like the Bikini Atoll tests, like it, that is not, what is it? Bomba Tsar or Tsar Bomba, something like that. It was like the biggest Soviet nuclear nuclear explosion ever in history. I think it was Tsar Bomba. The biggest nuclear test in history. It feels like that falls somewhat short of that. And maybe there's more stuff to come out, but on the timetable that we're looking at right now, in terms of a matter of days, the clock is ticking here. Putting stuff out 2 weeks from now doesn't do you any good if the decision gets made in the next 3 days. So, if you don't see something else substantial coming out, like there may not be, anything behind that curtain.
No. And the last thing, Tom, Bovada just released odds for where Counter Stallions will be working next year. The best odds, Southern Methodist University, SMU, minus 120. Michigan State, plus 950. All three directional Michigan schools, plus 1,200. The University of Miami, plus 1,500. Florida State, plus 1,500. Detroit Mercy, plus 2,500. Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Minnesota, all plus 5,000. Thoughts on best odds there? Who you should shoot for there?
Here's my gambling advice to you. If dude is going to get a show cause that will make it impossible for him to work in the college sports realm is not on the board, then you should probably keep your money in your pocket, because I do not think any of those are probably going to be the correct answer. I don't know what his dad does, but working at whatever his dad does is probably not a bad guess if his dad owns a business or something. College football does not feel like it is very likely going to be in his future for the next few years.
Not even at SMU?
I think they may be past the gold Trans Am days, especially because they are getting a TV distribution of $0.0, if I recall correctly, from the ACC moving forward. So I'm not sure they're going to have the crack legal staff available to, fight what will probably be a fairly lengthy show cause.
So that will do it. Hopefully we answered some questions and presented what we knew and responsibly speculated on what we didn't and told you what we didn't, while also telling you what we thought. Just having a conversation about the craziest thing going on right now. So want to thank you all for tuning in. Please hit the like if you have not yet. If you're watching this, subscribe on YouTube if you have not. And of course, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can become a member. Check us out there on the message board. I've seen a bunch of new members joining. So just go ahead and jump on in and see what the fuss is all about. So I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.